Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Patrice, and in this video we will be discussing things I've read. And now let's get started. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is a cozy mystery. Actually, it's a young adult cozy mystery slash historical fiction, and the title is The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie, and this was written by Alan Bradley. The summary says it's the summer of 1950, and young Flavia de Lucy finds a man lying in the cucumber patch and watches as he takes his last breath. When the police arrest her father, Flavia has to figure out who the murderer is before time runs out. Now, this book is the first in the Flavia de Lucy, Lucy series. And I wanted to get this because this is the first book that I've found for adults, besides like Encyclopedia Brown and Nancy Drew, that has a young person as the sleuth. And Flavia is 11 years old, and she has like um, not obsession, but she's very interested in chemistry. She's very smart. She also has a thing learning about poisons and stuff like that. So that's one reason why I wanted to pick this up and to see if this was a series that, I would be interested in reading further. The things that I didn't like about this, so Flavia has two older sisters, and they seem like they like hate each other. So they just fought a lot. Like her two sisters, they locked her in the closet, and then she had to figure out like how to pickpocket her way out. And then Flavia like poisoned her sister's lipstick and gave her poison ivy all over her face. Like I didn't like that part. And then her dad, so they are also in the UK. Like the series is set in the UK. So, like there's this whole like stiff upper lip thing, like you don't show a bunch of affection. But her dad, like it just seems like um he shows them like no affection or interest in their lives and what they're doing. He's a stamp collector, and he's more like worried about the stamps and things than he is about the kids. But also their mom died when Flavia was very young. So he is also wrapped up in his grief. So I think that's also part of the reason, why he's a little bit absent. So I did not like the family dynamics that were going on in this book. And also, the culprit was very obvious, like the murderer. If you read like a lot of mysteries, you'll figure out who it is right away. So this book, I was pretty neutral. Like I'm not sure. I think I would need another book, like to read maybe the second or third book in the series to really know if I would want to continue it. So I am going to get the second book, but this book gets a 3 stars from me. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Magnificent Ruins, and this is a literary fiction slash contemporary fiction, and this was written by Nayantara Roy. And let me give you the overview. At 29, Lila is a rising star book editor in Brooklyn. When she learns she's inherited her family's enormous ancestral home in Kolkata, India, Lila travels to Kolkata and reunites with her mom, grandmother, aunts, uncles, and cousins who resent her sudden inheritance. She's also entangled in a love triangle with her first boyfriend and her star author slash lover. When a sudden death occurs, long suppressed family secrets arise, and Lila is forced to deal with the consequences. So, the things that I enjoy. So, even though this is like a family drama and the main characters are like an immigrant family, I think it's so relatable because all of us have families and they're, and sometimes they are full of conflict and drama. So I think everyone can relate to that. And I also like how the book explored like the generational trauma that Lila and her family have endured, and just like how this cycle is passed down from generation to generation. So the things I didn't particularly care for, um, most of the characters I didn't like. I didn't really care for Lila or her mom and the rest of her family. And I don't know. I think I just didn't want like this type of story that the author was telling, especially like about generational trauma. I didn't want all of the other family members, I guess. So I think if the author had kept it to Lila, her mom, and her grandma, that would have been a more interesting book, because then you could really see like their dynamics and how um, they would have to deal with the lies and secrets that they have been telling to kind of heal and get through it. And then there were also like some extra chapters that I didn't think the book needed. Like there were some, after the sudden death, the police got involved, and then the police got a couple of chapters, and I didn't think the book needed that. Like she could have left those out. I did like how the story concluded, like how the book was wrapped up. Um, like I said, I think I would have just liked it more if it focused on Lila, her mom, and the grandmother. But I did end up giving this book a 4-star review. The last book that I'm going to talk about today is The Message, and this is a book of essays by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and I will give you the summary. In The Message, Ta-Nehisi Coates grapples with questions about how our stories expose and distort our realities. The first part of the book takes us with Coates on his trip to Senegal, Africa. Next, we head to South Carolina, where he attends a school board meeting discussing whether to ban his book, Between the World and Me. Lastly, Coates travels to Palestine and gives his account of what's happening on the ground. So this book for me, I really like this book. I really like Ta-Nehisi Coates, and I have read Between the World and Me. I've also read The Case for Reparations, the article he wrote for the Atlantic magazine. And I tried reading The Water Dancer, but I didn't finish that one. And I may go back and get it. But I really did enjoy this book. I liked it because it made me think. Um, it just had me thinking about, like I guess like some some of the big questions that he was asking in the book. Um, I got to switch to my big notebook because I wrote a lot down. Well, not a lot, but okay. So I am going to give you my thoughts on how I interpreted what he was saying in his essays. Um, so the overarching theme that I got from this book was about myth making. And it really causes you to examine like the myths that we tell ourselves as individuals and what society tries to tell us as a whole. Um, and really in general, like how I'm taking it, like he was saying how we invent these myths, especially for people that are or were oppressed, how they invent like grand stories or heroes so that they can forget their weakness from being oppressed. So, for example, in the first essay, he travels to Africa, and he was just telling like how, I guess at first, like he did not feel like this big connection, or like when you first get there, I guess you should feel like, oh, I'm here, I'm home, welcome home, or I'm back. And he didn't really feel that until, I guess, like a couple of days into his trip. And then he was also saying like how for the myth making part, like how we as African Americans, because we have been oppressed here in America, we try to elevate our history instead of just looking from being enslaved. We look at Africa and we try to make it kind of like Wakanda, or by saying like we come from kings and queens, and like we'll name our children African names, just to try and take back some of that power. So that was nice to get his perspective on visiting Africa, and that is definitely something that is on my bucket list. I do want to go back. I would like to take like a DNA test and to see like where some of my ancestors may have come from, but I do not trust DNA things. Like, I don't know, like I think they're gonna steal our DNA and use it to clone us and stuff like that. So I'm a little hesitant to do like a 23andMe or any of those other like DNA things. But I do want to go back to Africa and just experience like being there, and like knowing that part of my own history. So then in the second essay, and bringing it back again to myth making, when he went to South Carolina to sit in on that school board meeting about banning his book, he also noticed while he was there, there were like a lot of Confederate monuments. So those monuments are like to pay homage to like the Confederate soldiers and other people, who were in the Civil War. But then again, it goes back to that myth making, because it's like, well, why do you want to celebrate these people? Because, they were like traitors to the government. Like, a lot of those statues and monuments are to people who, were in the Confederate Army, or they're like people that were in the KKK, or like known racists and stuff like that. So, like, why would you want to have those statues around? And a lot of people will say, oh, well, it's the history, but those statues were not even erected during the Civil War or during the Confederacy. Those statues were put up during Jim Crow, and they were really um, statues that were to further terrorize Black people here in America, because it just reminds you of all the violence and the history that went on, you know, during that time. So it's not like you're honoring these people. You're really just trying to, cloak that in like that honor, you're cloaking that racism and, you know, just trying to scare people with, oh, but it's history. So again, that's another way, like we're creating these myths that these people are heroes and they are not heroes and don't need to be honored. And then the third essay, he is talking about like his trip to Israel and Palestine. And I know this is like the controversial part of the book, but like I didn't really find it controversial. Like I know when he was being interviewed about this book, like one of the um, news people on CBS was like, this is I guess like a manifesto that you would see in a terrorist backpack. And I just didn't get that from what he was saying. He was giving his honest like opinions of what he saw on the ground when he visited. So in this third essay, he's also talking about myth making because a lot of the land that's being taken over in Gaza, a lot of it is being taken by saying it's an archaeological site, and it's being taken from the Gazans who own the land, and the Jewish government is saying because it's an archaeological site, like we have the rights to the land. Like even if they have not found anything significant, you know, that actually shows that it is the actual site. They are taking the land. And then also, he's talking about like the brutality and the response of like the government in this war with Gaza. And it is because they do not want to look weak because of what happened during the Holocaust when a lot of, um, I guess, Jewish people did not fight back against the Nazis, even though there were more of the people than there were Nazis. And I guess, like now they're just like, well, we're not going to do that again. We're not going to be weak again. So if anyone comes for us, like we're going to really show them that they shouldn't. So those are my takes on what he was saying about myth making in regards to his essays and what he was writing. But the questions, I guess, or my takeaways after finishing the full book was one, like, how do we end cycles of violence? Because the trauma and like PTSD that's passed on to the next generations, like someone has to say, like we're not going to do this anymore. And that would require, like both sides to come to the table and realize that they have to compromise. And I also think that that goes to a scarcity mindset. Like everyone, all the things that we as human beings do against each other. Um, all the wars and violence and everything else, I think can just be attributed to, like this scarcity mindset, like there's not going to be enough. So, I have to do what I have to do so that my family and my things are protected instead of saying, well, there is enough, there's enough for everyone. And, individually and collectively, we have to look at working together as a community, but then we also have to think about, well, who's in that community? because it is going to be people that don't look like you, or maybe even think like you, or worship like you. But we all have to remember, like we're all here together. And if I am helping you with a collective mindset, then there will be enough, because we'll all be helping each other. Um, I think it all goes back to like the love your neighbor as yourself. Like, and if you really were loving your neighbor as yourself, you wouldn't mind helping each other. You wouldn't mind giving up a little bit of what you have to make sure everyone could have. So, um, that was one thing I was thinking about. And then again, like I said, just like ending like the violence, and just thinking about like the trauma that we're passing on. Because if we do not come to a resolution, then it is just going to keep perpetuating over and over again. And we're just going to keep seeding, like this hatred and violence for each other, when we really should be loving each other. So those were my thoughts after reading, and what I thought about what he was saying. And I would definitely recommend that everyone read the book. I definitely gave it a 5-star rating. We've made it to the end of another video. Please let me know if you have read any of these books, if you are thinking of reading any of these books. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you the next time. Bye-bye.